For 5 years, she endured every herbal remedy, every healer's examination, every whispered prayer to the moon goddess. For 5 years, she felt her husband's hope curdle into resentment. And on the day of the Grand Council, before every noble in the kingdom, the Alpha King declared his queen worthless. Barren, he called her, a failure to her people. The room fell silent as he stripped away her crown. But one voice broke that silence, a rival king stepping forward with words that would ignite 3 kingdoms. If you cannot see her value, then I will take what you discard. I would be honored to call her my queen. She was meant to be humiliated, destroyed. Instead, she became the woman 2 kings would go to war for. But this time, the choice would be hers alone. Nyra Winterbloom had once believed in fairy tales. 5 years ago, the mate bond had connected her to Darius Voidfang, the powerful Alpha King of the Void Kingdom, and she thought destiny had blessed her. She became his queen with joy in her heart and hope for the future. That hope died slowly, month by month, year by year. Every failed conception became another crack in their bond. Every pitying look from courtiers, every healer shaking their head, every full moon without the blessing of a child, they all built walls between Nyra and her king. Darius's warmth became coldness. His passion became duty. His love became resentment. Now, standing in the Grand Council Hall in her silver and blue regalia, Nyra felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. 5 years of trying, 5 years of failure, and today the elders had demanded answers about the lack of an heir. Darius sat on his throne of black stone, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression carved from ice. When his cold eyes met hers across the hall, Nyra knew something terrible was about to happen. She just didn't know that her destruction would become her liberation. The Grand Council Hall stretched before Nyra like a nightmare made of polished obsidian and flickering torchlight. Every noble house in the Void Kingdom had gathered, their eyes sharp with judgment, their whispers cutting deeper than any blade. She stood in the center of it all, alone in her silver and blue regalia, the crown on her head suddenly feeling less like an honor and more like a noose. 5 years. 5 years of herbal remedies that tasted like ash and hope. 5 years of healers pressing cold hands to her belly and shaking their heads with practiced sympathy. 5 years of prayers whispered to the moon goddess in the dark hours before dawn, begging for the blessing that never came. 5 years of watching her husband transform from the man who'd held her on their wedding night and promised forever, into the stranger who now sat 20 feet away on his throne of black stone, looking at her like she was a problem to be solved. Darius Voidfang, Alpha King of the Void Kingdom, her fated mate. The bond still hummed between them, that sacred connection the moon goddess herself had forged, but it felt twisted now, corrupted by disappointment and unspoken accusations. The matter of succession can no longer be ignored, Elder Hrothgar's voice echoed through the hall. The ancient wolf stood before the throne, his ceremonial robes pooling on the floor. 5 years without an heir threatens the stability of this kingdom. Nyra's hands trembled. She clasped them together, willing herself to stillness. Every eye was on her, hundreds of them. Nobles who'd once bowed now looked at her with pity, or worse, satisfaction. A queen's primary duty, Darius said, his voice carrying that cold authority that had once made her feel safe, is to provide succession, to ensure the kingdom's future. He paused, and Nyra felt her heart crack at what she heard in that silence. After 5 years, we must acknowledge what has become undeniable. She wanted to run, to disappear, to transform into her wolf and flee into the forests where no one could see her shame. But she was a queen. She'd been raised to endure. Darius stood, each movement precise and final. Queen Nyra Winterbloom has proven herself, incapable of fulfilling her most fundamental obligation. The word hung in the air like poison. Incapable. She is barren, Darius continued, and the hall erupted in shocked murmurs. A failure to her people, to this kingdom, to me. Nyra's vision blurred. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not like this. Darius descended the dais, each step echoing like a death knell. When he reached her, his dark eyes held nothing but ice. He reached for her crown, the delicate circlet of silver she'd worn since their wedding day, and lifted it from her head. You are queen no longer. The crown caught the torchlight as he turned away, carrying it back to his throne. Nyra stood frozen, stripped bare before everyone she'd ever known. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of them. If you cannot see her value, a voice rang out from the visiting nobles section, shattering the stunned silence. Then I will take what you discard. Every head turned. Nyra's breath caught as King Lucien Emberwolf rose from his seat, golden hair gleaming in the firelight, blue eyes fierce with something that looked like rage. The rival king, the one Darius had always viewed with suspicion and contempt. Lucien stepped forward, his gaze finding Nyra's across the hall. I would be honored, he said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner, to call her my queen. The hall exploded into chaos, and Nyra felt something shift inside her, the first spark of something other than despair. Hope. The chaos in the Grand Council Hall crystallized into a single point of fury, Darius. His wolf surfaced in his eyes, turning them pitch black as he stalked toward Lucien. You dare! I dare to see what you clearly cannot, Lucien interrupted, his calm voice somehow louder than Darius's rage. He stood his ground as the Alpha King of the Void Kingdom closed the distance between them, two apex predators on the edge of violence. She deserves better than your contempt. She is mine, Darius snarled. The mate bond means nothing if you don't honor it. Lucien's blue eyes blazed. You just declared her worthless before this entire assembly. You stripped her crown. You destroyed her. He looked past Darius to where Nyra stood trembling. I'm offering her a choice you never gave her. Every instinct screamed at Nyra to stay silent, to make herself smaller, to not draw more attention. But something in Lucien's words, something in the way he looked at her like she was a person, not a failure, made her find her voice. I accept. The words came out barely above a whisper, but in the stunned silence, they carried. Darius turned to her, disbelief and rage warring on his face. You would leave your kingdom? Your people? You just banished me from both, Nyra said, and was shocked by the steadiness she heard in her own voice. King Lucien is offering me what you took away, dignity. The journey to the Ember Kingdom passed in a blur of fear and exhaustion. Lucien's guards surrounded their carriage, vigilant against pursuit. Every mile that stretched between Nyra and the Void Kingdom felt like breathing room she hadn't known she needed. When they crested the final hill and Lucien's palace came into view, Nyra gasped. Where Darius's castle was all dark stone and sharp edges, this place glowed warm as honey in the sunset. Golden spires reached toward the sky, and gardens bloomed in every direction. "Welcome," Lucien said softly, "to your new home." The palace staff bowed to her, actually bowed, not with mockery or pity, but with genuine respect. A woman in healer's robes approached, her smile kind. "Your Majesty, if you'll allow me, I'd like to examine you, ensure the journey caused you no harm." "Your Majesty." Nyra's throat tightened. She'd lost that title hours ago, but here they used it like it had never been taken away. Lucien walked beside her through corridors that smelled of jasmine and hope. At the door to a suite of rooms that made her quarters in the Void Kingdom look sparse, he paused. "I know this is overwhelming," he said, "and I know you don't trust this yet. Trust me yet." His voice gentled. "But I need you to hear something, Nyra. You're not broken. You never were." Tears finally came, hot and unstoppable. For the first time in 5 years, someone looked at her and didn't see a failure. "Rest tonight," Lucien continued. "Tomorrow my healers will begin proper examinations, not to judge you, but to help you. Whatever they find or don't find, your worth doesn't change." As he turned to leave, Nyra found herself speaking. "Why? Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" Lucien looked back, something achingly gentle in his expression. "Because 5 years ago, at a treaty signing, I watched you tend to a servant's child who'd fallen in the courtyard. You didn't have to. You were a new queen with 1,000 duties. But you sat in the dirt in your formal gown and made that little girl laugh while the healer came." He smiled. "That's when I knew Darius Voidfang was the luckiest bastard in all the kingdoms, and the biggest fool." The door closed softly behind him, and Nyra sank onto the edge of the bed, crying for everything she'd lost and everything she might, impossibly, find. The examination room smelled of herbs and morning light. Nyra sat on the cushioned bench while Master Healer Aldrich studied the vial of her blood, his weathered face growing darker with each passing moment. Lucien stood by the window, tension radiating from his still form. "This makes no sense," Aldrich muttered, holding the vial up to the light. "Your Majesty, have you experienced any unusual symptoms? Headaches, nausea, persistent fatigue?" Nyra frowned. "Nothing beyond what's normal for someone trying to conceive, Seul." Words still tasted like failure. Aldrich exchanged a look with Lucien that made Nyra's stomach clench. "What is it?" "There are traces of nightshade essence in your blood," the healer said carefully. "A very old, very subtle poison. In small doses over time, it prevents conception without causing obvious harm. It's nearly undetectable." The room tilted. "Poison? Someone has been poisoning you systematically for years," Lucien said, his voice deadly calm in a way that made her wolf shiver. "You were never barren, Nyra. You were sabotaged." Memory crashed through her like a wave. Lady Seraphine, beautiful, elegant Lady Seraphine, Darius's most trusted advisor, who'd been so kind after each failed conception, who'd brought her special tea every evening. "For your health," she'd say with that sympathetic smile, to strengthen you for the next try. The tea, Nyra whispered. She always brought me tea. Lucien was at her side instantly. Who? Lady Seraphine, Darius's advisor. Nyra's hands shook. Every evening for 5 years, she said it would help. I trusted her. The fury that flashed across Lucien's face was terrifying and somehow comforting. Someone was finally angry on her behalf. Aldrich, how long to cleanse her system? Weeks, perhaps months. The poison has accumulated over years. The healer's voice gentled. But Your Majesty, there's good news. Once we flush it from your system, there's no reason you shouldn't conceive naturally. Your body was never the problem. Nyra couldn't breathe. 5 years. 5 years of shame, of Darius's disappointment, of believing she was fundamentally broken. And all of it was a lie. All of it was orchestrated by someone she'd trusted. Why? The word came out broken. Why would she do this? We'll find out, Lucien promised, his hand finding hers. I've already sent word to my contacts in the Void Kingdom. Discreetly, if Lady Seraphine has been purchasing nightshade essence, there will be records, witnesses. Over the following days, as Aldrich began the careful detoxification process, evidence trickled in like poison in reverse. A merchant who'd sold rare herbs to the lady's maid. A servant who'd seen Seraphine adding something to the evening tea. Purchase records buried in accounts that shouldn't exist. Each piece of evidence felt like a key unlocking chains Nyra hadn't known she wore. The shame that had crushed her for 5 years began transforming into something hotter, sharper, rage. She destroyed my marriage, Nyra said one evening, staring at the documents spread across Lucien's study table. She made Darius hate me. She made me hate myself. She stole 5 years of your life, Lucien agreed, his voice dark. The question is what you want to do about it. Nyra looked up at him, feeling something fierce awakening in her chest. For 5 years, she'd made herself small, apologetic, desperate to fix something that was never broken. No more. I want the truth exposed, she said. I want everyone who watched Darius humiliate me to know it was all based on lies. She straightened her shoulders. But first, I want to heal. I want to be strong again. Lucien smiled, proud and dangerous. Then that's exactly what we'll do. For the first time in 5 years, Nyra felt like herself again. And she was done being a victim. The detoxification was brutal. Some days Nyra could barely leave her bed, as Master Aldrich's remedies purged years of poison from her system. But every afternoon, like clockwork, Lucien appeared at her door with books tucked under his arm, an easy conversation that made her forget, for precious hours, why she was here. This one's about a queen who conquered 3 kingdoms with nothing but her wit, he said one day, settling into the chair beside her bed. Thought you might appreciate it. Nyra smiled despite her exhaustion. No magic swords or prophecies? Just a woman who refused to accept other people's limitations. His eyes held hers. Reminded me of someone. 3 weeks into treatment, Nyra found the courage to voice the fear that haunted her nights. They were in the garden, her first real venture outside, and the late afternoon sun felt like a blessing on her skin. What if, she stopped, the words catching. What if once the poison is gone, I still can't conceive? What if there's something else wrong with me? Lucien stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Then you're still valuable, still worthy, still extraordinary. He said it with such conviction that tears pricked her eyes. Nyra, your worth has nothing to do with whether you can bear children. You could never have a child, and you would still be remarkable. Darius didn't think so. Darius is a fool. Lucien stepped closer, his voice gentle but fierce. And I'm grateful for his foolishness, because it brought you here. Something shifted between them in that moment, something that had been building since he defended her in that horrible hall. Something warm and terrifying and entirely different from the mate bond she'd known with Darius. Meals became Nyra's favorite part of each day. Lucien insisted she eat with him rather than alone in her rooms, and slowly, tentatively, she began to unfold. He made her laugh with stories about incompetent courtiers and diplomatic disasters. He asked her opinions on kingdom matters and actually listened to her answers. You should have been at the border negotiations last month, he said one evening over wine and roasted vegetables. The ambassador from the Western Isles brought his pet parrot, and the thing had clearly been taught every curse word known to wolves. Nyra laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprising them both. What did you do? Pretended it was normal, very solemn diplomacy, while this bird screamed profanity. His grin was infectious. The ambassador was mortified. The treaty was signed in record time. She was still laughing when she realized something startling. She hadn't thought about Darius in days. The betrayal still hurt, the anger still simmered, but the obsessive mental loop, wondering what she'd done wrong, how she could have fixed it, had gone quiet. She looked at Lucien across the table, firelight catching in his golden hair, his blue eyes warm with affection, and felt something bloom in her chest. Not the forced destiny of a mate bond. Something chosen. Something earned through kindness and respect and genuine connection. Thank you, she said softly. For the parrot story? For seeing me. The words came from somewhere deep and honest. Not the failed queen or the poisoned victim. Just me. Lucien reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I've always seen you, Nyra. Since that day with the child in the courtyard, you're impossible to miss. His thumb traced circles on her wrist, and Nyra realized with a start that she wanted him to kiss her. Not because destiny demanded it, but because she chose it. And that made all the difference. The detoxification was brutal. Some days Nyra could barely leave her bed as Master Aldrich's remedies purged years of poison from her system. But every afternoon, like clockwork, Lucien appeared at her door with books tucked under his arm, an easy conversation that made her forget, for precious hours, why she was here. This one's about a queen who conquered 3 kingdoms with nothing but her wit, he said one day, settling into the chair beside her bed. Thought you might appreciate it. Nyra smiled despite her exhaustion. No magic swords or prophecies? Just a woman who refused to accept other people's limitations. His eyes held hers. Reminded me of someone. 3 weeks into treatment, Nyra found the courage to voice the fear that haunted her nights. They were in the garden, her first real venture outside, and the late afternoon sun felt like a blessing on her skin. What if... She stopped, the words catching. What if once the poison is gone, I still can't conceive? What if there's something else wrong with me? Lucien stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Then you're still valuable, still worthy, still extraordinary. He said it with such conviction that tears pricked her eyes. Nyra, your worth has nothing to do with whether you can bear children. You could never have a child, and you would still be remarkable. Darius didn't think so. Darius is a fool. Lucien stepped closer, his voice gentle but fierce. And I'm grateful for his foolishness, because it brought you here. Something shifted between them in that moment, something that had been building since he'd defended her in that horrible hall. Something warm and terrifying, and entirely different from the mate bond she'd known with Darius. Meals became Nyra's favorite part of each day. Lucien insisted she eat with him rather than alone in her rooms, and slowly, tentatively, she began to unfold. He made her laugh with stories about incompetent courtiers and diplomatic disasters. He asked her opinions on kingdom matters and actually listened to her answers. You should have been at the border negotiations last month, he said one evening over wine and roasted vegetables. The ambassador from the Western Isles brought his pet parrot, and the thing had clearly been taught every curse word known to wolves. Nyra laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprising them both. What did you do? Pretended it was normal, very solemn diplomacy while this bird screamed profanity. His grin was infectious. The ambassador was mortified. The treaty was signed in record time. She was still laughing when she realized something startling. She hadn't thought about Darius in days. The betrayal still hurt. The anger still simmered, but the obsessive mental loop, wondering what she'd done wrong, how she could have fixed it, had gone quiet. She looked at Lucien across the table, firelight catching in his golden hair, his blue eyes warm with affection, and felt something bloom in her chest. Not the forced destiny of a mate bond. Something chosen. Something earned through kindness and respect and genuine connection. Thank you, she said softly. For the parrot story? For seeing me. The words came from somewhere deep and honest. Not the failed queen or the poisoned victim. Just me. Lucien reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I've always seen you, Nyra, since that day with the child in the courtyard. You're impossible to miss. His thumb traced circles on her wrist, and Nyra realized with a start that she wanted him to kiss her. Not because destiny demanded it, but because she chose it. And that made all the difference. The grand trial was set for the next full moon, and Lucien's palace transformed into a war room of preparation. Nyra spent her days with Master Aldrich confirming her full recovery, her evenings with Lucien's advisors learning the intricacies of inter-kingdom law, and her nights memorizing every statute about queen's rights and mate bond dissolution. You need to understand, Counselor Marin said, spreading ancient texts across the table. Darius will claim ownership through the mate bond. Your defense must be ironclad. It will be, Nyra assured her, feeling stronger than she had in years. The poison was gone. Her mind was clear, and she had evidence that would shatter Darius's world the way he'd shattered hers. But 2 weeks before the trial, as she stood from her chair too quickly during a strategy session, the room spun violently. Lucien caught her before she fell. When did you last eat? He demanded, concern etched in every line of his face. This morning, another wave of dizziness and nausea. Sudden, overwhelming nausea. Master Aldrich was summoned immediately. The examination was brief. The revelation was world-altering. You're with child, Your Majesty, Aldrich said, his weathered face breaking into a smile. About 6 weeks along, I'd estimate. The world stopped. Nyra's hand flew to her still flat stomach, tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. Are you certain? Completely certain. The healer's voice was warm with joy. Your body has healed beautifully. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. There never was. Proof, undeniable proof that she'd been poisoned, sabotaged, destroyed by lies. The vindication should have felt sweet. Instead, Nyra felt terror crash over her in waves. What if... Her voice broke. What if something happens? What if I lose? Hey, Lucien was there, his hands cupping her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Breathe, Nyra. Just breathe. This is proof, she whispered. Proof that I was never barren. But Lucien, what if... We'll face this together, he said with absolute certainty. Whatever comes, you're not alone anymore. His hand covered hers on her stomach. And our child will be loved and protected. I swear it. Our child. The words settled something deep in Nyra's chest. Not a political necessity. Not a desperate attempt to prove worth. A child created from choice, from growing love, from healing. We tell them at the trial, Nyra decided, her voice steadying. We show them exactly what Seraphine's poison cost me, what Darius's cruelty cost me. She straightened her shoulders, and we show them who I am now. The days before the trial blurred past. Nyra worked with renewed purpose, her hand occasionally drifting to her stomach where new life grew. She rehearsed her testimony until every word was carved in stone. She studied law until she could recite statutes in her sleep. And when the seamstress asked what colors she wanted for her trial gown, Nyra didn't hesitate. White and gold, she said, colors of truth and dawn. The morning of the trial, Nyra stood before her mirror in flowing white silk embroidered with gold thread that caught the light like sunrise. Her dark hair was crowned with a simple gold circlet, not a queen's crown, but something that declared her sovereignty anyway. She looked like herself again. No, she looked like someone better, someone who'd been broken and reformed herself stronger in the fractured places. Ready? Lucien asked from the doorway, magnificent in his formal attire. Nyra turned to face him, one hand protective over her stomach, the other reaching for his. Ready. The neutral grounds between kingdoms had been transformed into a grand tribunal. 3 thrones sat elevated, one for each kingdom's ruling authority. Below them, hundreds of witnesses packed the space. Nobles, healers, servants, all gathered to witness justice or its failure. Nyra stood in the center, Lucien at her right, as the High Arbiter read the formal charges. King Darius Voidfang and Lady Seraphine Nightshade stand accused of conspiracy, poisoning, and the unlawful persecution of Queen Nyra Winterbloom. Darius looked carved from stone, his dark eyes fixed on Nyra with an intensity that once would have made her flinch. Today, she met his gaze without wavering. Master Aldrich testified first, his voice clear and clinical. The poison used was nightshade essence, administered in small doses over approximately 5 years. It prevents conception without causing obvious harm, making it nearly impossible to detect without specific testing. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Darius's expression cracked, shock bleeding through his controlled facade. That's impossible, he said. Nyra was examined by dozens of healers, none of whom were looking for poison, Aldrich countered. Why would they? Queens aren't usually systematically poisoned by their own household. The servant testimony came next. A young maid, trembling but resolute, described how Lady Seraphine personally prepared the queen's evening tea. A merchant confirmed selling rare herbs to Seraphine's contacts, herbs with no legitimate use except in poison making. With each testimony, Darius's face darkened. But his rage wasn't directed at Nyra. It was fixed on the beautiful woman standing in chains beside the tribunal, Lady Seraphine, his trusted advisor, wearing resignation like armor. "Did you do this?" Darius demanded, his alpha authority making the words a command. Seraphine lifted her chin. "Yes." The single word detonated through the hall. Even those who'd suspected seemed shocked by her brazen admission. "Why?" The word tore from Darius like a wound. "Because she wasn't worthy of you," Seraphine said, her voice carrying that same sympathetic tone she'd used bringing Nyra poisoned tea. "I've loved you for 10 years, watched you throw yourself away on a mate bond to some unremarkable girl with nothing to offer. I just helped destiny correct itself." "You destroyed my marriage," Darius roared. "I freed you from a failure." "She was never the failure," Darius's voice broke. "She was poisoned by you because of me." He turned to Nyra, devastation written across his features. "But she's still mine, the mate, bond." "A bond built on lies and cruelty is no bond at all." Nyra's voice rang clear, silencing the murmurs. She stepped forward, white and gold silk flowing around her like dawn itself. "You humiliated me before the entire kingdom based on lies someone else fed you. You stripped my crown without question. You never once considered I might be suffering rather than failing. I was wrong. You were cruel." Nyra's hand moved to her stomach, a protective gesture she didn't try to hide. "And I deserve better than someone who would discard me so easily." "She deserves choice, not ownership," Lucien added, moving to stand beside her. "The mate bond doesn't give you the right to claim someone who doesn't want you." Darius's eyes tracked the movement of Nyra's hand, and she watched understanding bloom across his face. "I'm pregnant," Nyra confirmed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 6 weeks, which means I was never barren." She let the words sink in. "Your advisor poisoned me, you abandoned me, and I found someone who saw my worth before I could give him anything." The silence was absolute. Then the High Arbiter spoke, her voice heavy with judgment. "The evidence is clear. Lady Seraphine will face exile and stripped titles. King Darius..." She paused. "The mate bond is hereby dissolved. Queen Nyra is free to choose her own path." Nyra looked at Darius one last time, seeing the regret and rage warring in his expression. Then she turned to Lucien, took his hand, and chose her future. The moment Nyra chose Lucien's hand, the air itself changed. Temperature dropped, light shifted, and then silver radiance poured through the tribunal like liquid moonlight, so bright that every witness had to shield their eyes. When the light coalesced into form, the moon goddess stood before them, ancient and beautiful and terrifying in her divine presence. Her form seemed to shift between solid and ethereal, her eyes holding the wisdom of millennia. "I have heard the testimonies," her voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "I have witnessed the truths laid bare. Every knee in the assembly bent. Even the kings bowed before the goddess who governed their very nature, who forged the sacred bonds that connected wolf souls. "Rise, Nyra Winterbloom," the goddess commanded. "You who have been wronged in my name." Nyra stood on trembling legs, feeling the weight of divine attention like sunshine and storm combined. The goddess moved closer, silver light trailing in her wake. The mate bond between Nyra Winterbloom and Darius Voidfang was sacred, the goddess said, her voice carrying judgment. It was betrayed by Darius's actions and dissolved by his cruelty. She turned to Darius, who remained bowed. "You allowed pride to poison what I made pure. You cast aside your mate based on lies you never questioned. You valued power over partnership." "I know," Darius said, his voice broken. "I know, and I am sorry?" The goddess's tone held no mercy. Sorry means nothing when the damage is done. A king who cannot honor his queen cannot honor his kingdom. She raised one hand, and silver light enveloped him. "You will abdicate your throne in favor of your brother, who possesses the wisdom you lack. Perhaps in humility, you will find the honor you lost." Darius's face crumbled, but he nodded acceptance. Beside him, Lady Seraphine tried to shrink back. "And you," the goddess turned to her, "who twisted love into poison and called it devotion. You are stripped of title, lands, and name. You will live your remaining years in exile, carrying the weight of the destruction you caused." Seraphine's scream echoed through the hall as guards dragged her away. Then the goddess faced Nyra again, and her expression softened. "You have endured much, been tested beyond what any should bear. The bond I forged was broken not by your failing, but by his." She extended one luminous hand. "So I offer you something rare. True choice. The mate bond is severed completely. You are free to choose your own path." The goddess's eyes shifted between Nyra and Lucien, then back to Darius. "What do you choose, Nyra Winterbloom?" 3 kingdoms held their breath. Nyra felt Darius's desperate hope across the space between them, the weight of what they'd once been. Then she felt Lucien's steady presence beside her, the man who'd chosen her when she was broken, who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. Her hand found Lucien's, their fingers intertwining with perfect certainty. "I choose the king who saw me as worthy before I could give him anything," Nyra said clearly. "I choose partnership over possession. I choose the man who helped me remember that my value isn't tied to what I can produce, but to who I am." She looked at Lucien, love and gratitude shining in her eyes. "I choose Lucien Emberwolf, if he'll have me." "Always," Lucien said, and pulled her close. The moon goddess smiled, radiant and approving. "Then it is done. Be blessed, both of you. May your union be founded on choice, respect, and genuine love." The silver light exploded outward, filling every corner of the tribunal with blessing. When it faded, the goddess was gone, but her approval lingered like starlight. Nyra turned one last time to look at Darius. He met her gaze with tears streaming down his face, finally understanding exactly what he'd lost. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know," Nyra said, "but I'm not." And she meant it. 6 months after the trial, the Ember Kingdom bloomed with celebration. Every street corner overflowed with flowers, every window glowed with candlelight, and the great temple stood adorned in white and gold, the colors that had become synonymous with their soon-to-be queen. Nyra stood before the mirror in her bridal chamber, her wedding gown flowing around her like captured sunlight. Her pregnancy was unmistakable now, a beautiful curve beneath silk and lace that the dress was specifically designed to honor rather than hide. She rested one hand on her growing belly, feeling the flutter of life within. "Ready?" her handmaiden asked, offering a crown of white roses and golden wheat. Nyra smiled, more than ready. The temple fell silent as she entered, all eyes on the woman who'd been called barren and worthless, now radiant with life and love. Lucien stood at the altar in gold and white to match her, his face transforming with joy as she walked toward him. "You're stunning," he whispered as she took his place beside him, not behind, not below, but beside. The high priestess who conducted the ceremony spoke not of duty and heirs, but of partnership and choice. "This union is built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the courage to choose love freely." When they were pronounced king and queen, equals in title and authority, the entire kingdom erupted in celebration. The coronation that followed was unlike any before it. 2 crowns, 2 thrones set at the same height, 2 rulers who would govern together. But Nyra and Lucien's first act as joint monarchs was to sign into law protections that would echo through generations. Queens could no longer be cast aside for failing to produce heirs. Mate bonds could be legally dissolved in cases of cruelty or abuse. Women's bodies were declared their own, not vessels for kingdom politics. Word of the reforms spread like wildfire. Within months, neighboring kingdoms began adopting similar laws. Even the Void Kingdom, now ruled by Darius's honorable brother, King Marcus, implemented sweeping changes. Darius himself had retreated from public life, working quietly to undo the damage his pride had caused. Nyra heard reports that he'd personally funded shelters for abandoned mates and sponsored medical research into reproductive health. It wasn't redemption, not entirely, but it was a start. 3 months after the wedding, on a night when the moon hung full and silver over the kingdom, Nyra went into labor. Lucien never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement and love. When dawn broke, 2 cries filled the royal chambers. A son with his father's golden hair and his mother's fierce spirit. A daughter with dark curls and eyes that promised wisdom beyond her years. Master Aldrich placed them in Nyra's arms, one on each side, their tiny bodies warm and perfect, and hers. Lucien sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, his face wet with tears of joy. "They're beautiful," he whispered. "You're beautiful. All of this is real," Nyra finished, looking down at her children, then up at her husband, then out the window where her kingdom was waking to news of the royal births. She thought of that woman who'd stood broken in the grand council hall, stripped of her crown and her dignity. She thought of the poison that had stolen years from her. She thought of Darius's cold voice declaring her worthless. And she thought of Lucien's steady hand reaching out in that same hall, offering sanctuary when she had nothing left. Her crown of gold and white caught the morning light as she held her children close, her husband beside her, her kingdom celebrating below. Not a queen defined by her womb, but a woman who'd chosen herself, and in doing so, changed the world. "I was told I was worthless," she thought, pressing a kiss to each tiny forehead. "He showed me I was priceless, And finally, completely, Nyra was free.